Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the podcast of the Business Connection, the world's first English language internet radio program about business in Brazil, and we're on air since June 2009. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American living in Brazil and known here as the King of Networking, talking from my studio in Campinas, São Paulo. Today's guest back with us again is Stuart Morgan, and he's talking with us from Swansea in the United Kingdom. Stuart is an international management consultant and an executive management trainer at PDC, which is Practice Development Consultants. So Stuart, hello again, and welcome back to Talk to Brazil.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine, and as I say, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, pleasure talking to you as well.
We spoke just a little more than a month ago here on the podcast, and we talked about cost of doing business, the constant need to reduce them. We talked about innovation, C-level learning, changing mindset, investments by China and Brazil. But today what I'd like to talk about is what I say is the CEO non-comfort zone. And it seems like 2020 got off to a challenging start, and every day something new. We see that American president's been impeached. The Economic Forum at Davos is waking up to climate change. And we're in the midst of a viral epidemic growing globally as we speak. And Brexit and the UK finally have decided to leave the European Union. So the question is, how do vendors need to prepare to reach the CEO when he or she is unreachable?
That's a very interesting question, Tom. The answer's not simple. It's quite complex. However, what we need to do is to be aware that all of these crises, and you've not talked in your introduction about what's happening in Australia either, which is an environmental catastrophe. What we've got is a very complex series of circumstances playing out in front of our eyes. We are part of history, and people will look back on this in a few years and wonder why we did what we did. And what's happening in the board-level offices at the moment is that the board-level directors and the CEO and CFO in particular are unclear about what the future holds.
Right.
We've been educating ourselves for the future, and now the future that we're looking at is quite unlike anything that we prepared for. So there's uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty.
But in a time like this, and even from the vendors, and part of your training is to help people reach CEOs and C-level persons, what are your suggestions?
There are very few CEOs and CFOs at the moment willing to buy big purchases. They're unsure about what the future holds. They don't want to make those big decisions. So what they're trying to cope with at the moment seems impossible. A lot of CEOs and CFOs are feeling stress. They're confused. They're trying to make big decisions to take the company forward, and yet they don't know whether to turn left, right, or go straight on, or take some steps backwards. It's creating a lot of concern for them at the mental health level. And I would say that you don't try to make any big approaches at the moment, and that what you try to do is get to know your CEO and CFO and try to see what issues they're trying to deal with.
And today, you brought up a point here, the mental health level. That's something you rarely hear about, or you hear CEOs talking about.
CEOs and CFOs are supposed to be tough people. They're supposed to be leading lights. They're supposed to be showing the vision for everybody else. So they're rarely going to admit that they have mental health problems. So what we need to do is really try to get in there, try to start a short, relevant conversation. Try to be mindful that they're going through the same problems that you're going through, but their problems are probably 100 times worse.
And they never stop 24/7.
Never stop 24/7. What we need to do is find out what's keeping the CEO and CFO awake at night. That's really what we want to do. And that means getting to know them intimately.
But how do you do that?
Small talk. Trying to learn how to start a conversation about everything and nothing in particular. You will have seen one of my posts on Facebook last week about walking on the sand dunes. Mm-hmm. And what I said is that myself and my wife went walking. We held hands. We talked about everything and nothing. We spent quality time together. And that's what you need to do with your CEO and CFOs. Spend quality time with them. Get to build that relationship. Use your emotional intelligence in order to get close to them and find out what it is that's keeping them awake at night.
So maybe just engage with them in social media, like what you just said about your Facebook. And what struck me about that, you created a page about the Gower Peninsula and basically just show fantastic settings in a country that I thought always rained, but you don't seem to ever show a picture of rain.
It does rain. In fact, it's been raining quite heavily this morning. But the reason that Gower's so green is that we've got this liquid sunshine that comes 3 or 4 times a week.
Now, that's always struck me being to the UK is the greenness.
Absolutely.
It's so green. Ireland, sunshine. It's green. Everything's so green, and it's a different green. It's just not a green that... Here in Brazil, there's a lot of green because it does rain, but it just seems to be a different green.
Yeah, it is. It's very rich and vibrant green. It's lovely. It's beautiful.
But tell us about the Gower Peninsula, just a little bit. I'm sure most of our listeners don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, Swansea, where I live, is actually on the Gower Peninsula. Swansea is an industrial town of about, it's a city. It's been a city for 50 years. And it's an industrial city. It was the world capital of copper smelting 150 years ago. 95% of all the copper smelted in the world was smelted in Swansea. And the Gower Peninsula has always been a green lung going out into the Bristol Channel. We've got some of the highest tidal ranges in the world. We have about 15 or 16 meters between high and low tide.
Wow, don't get caught out on the sand, huh?
And the sands, we've got extensive beaches. Some of the beaches here, you can go walking on them, and if you see another person, you'll shout at them and tell them to get off your beach. These beaches are huge. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. And my wife and myself set up this Facebook page, which is called Gower, a delightful place of outstanding natural beauty. It is a designated place of outstanding natural beauty. We've got 5 castles dating back to the 10th, 11th century. We've got some exciting scenery, and we've got some, as I mentioned, some beautiful beaches. Myself and my wife walked round the Gower Peninsula about 3 or 4 years ago. Walking right round is about 45 miles, about 70 kilometres. And it's absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. So what we've done is we've set up this Facebook group, and we're trying to let people in the rest of the world know what it's like to visit and to live in Gower.
And it's amazing. I follow that. Like I said, now you told me that it rains once in a while. I can believe you. But it is striking. But I want to take that point back to what we were talking about, the CEOs. Many times, and no matter where you are, you can be in a high-rise in downtown São Paulo or London or Frankfurt or anywhere. But sometimes we don't see what's close around us. And maybe part of what your suggestion is to get out of your chair, take a look outside, see the birds, see a flower, do something different. It doesn't have to be for a day or a trip. It may be 15 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. But get out of your setting just to breathe differently.
Yeah, and what we do is we try to walk. A few years ago, we joined a gym, but I absolutely hated it because it was just staring at a wall or a TV screen, listening to some very loud music, feeling very sweaty and very uncomfortable. And we discovered that walking over the fields is far more therapeutic. You relax more. You feel part of the world instead of cut off from the world.
Well, that's a suggestion for board meetings, huh?
Absolutely. Well, I had a board meeting last Friday with one of my companies, and what we did is we went to a countryside pub, relaxed in the bar, had some coffee and a sandwich, and just eyeballed each other and made small talk. And out of that small talk came some very interesting ideas that we're now going to put into practice in the coming weeks.
So small talk can become big talk.
The small talk is a bit like brainstorming, but you don't actually realize you're doing it. And then all of a sudden you get that light bulb moment when you go, hey, that's what we should have been doing weeks ago.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
That's what we're doing right now.
That's what we've been doing, actually.
If you meet a CEO or a CFO, the last thing I would say is don't pick up your computer. Keep your computer away from you. Mm-hmm. Don't bring any aids between you and the CEO, because they form a barrier. Just eyeball the guy. Make eye contact. Make him feel comfortable. Make him feel valued. That's what you've got to do.
Say hello and ask him his full name.
Well, if you don't already know his full name, then shame on you. Because if he's your client or a potential client, you ought to know quite a lot about him already. And with LinkedIn and Facebook and all these other access through the internet, things like fortraders.com, Bloomberg, you can just go online and download the biographical details of these CEOs and CFOs immediately. It's very, very easy to find.
Yeah, but I agree with you, but speaking specifically now of Brazil, that's not the case of many C-level persons I know here. Brazil, first of all, is a first-name type country, and rarely do people use their second name, even when they introduce themselves. And so it's not always, in many events that I go to, where you go and you have the name tag. The name tag is just a first name.
You'll remember who Jimmy Carter is.
Yes.
Jimmy Carter said when he was president of the United States that if you get to the age of 40 and you still need a name tag, then you made a wrong career move.
Well, you were here in Brazil and you saw that.
I did. And I like first names. I was in the Royal Air Force for a number of years. And when I was in the Royal Air Force, people very rarely used first names. Now everybody's doing it. And in fact, one of the very senior command officers in the Royal Air Force, I call him by his first name. I don't call him by his rank. And I say he's a very senior Royal Air Force officer. Everybody's on first name terms these days. And that's what we need to do.
Well, get to the first name basis, but not to forget or to understand and know the last name.
Absolutely. One of the tricks I learned when you go to a cocktail party, which we used to do years ago, is that you say to somebody, "I'm sorry, but I can't remember your name."
Mm-hmm.
And if he says, "Oh, my name's Stuart," you say, "No, it's not your first name. It's your surname I can't remember."
That's the and that's the way, huh?
And that's the way, yeah. And I think you need to eyeball people. You need to have a relationship with them that is genuine, that's honest. That one way you can share information that is useful to each other, but do it about. Well, for example, I know the chief executive of one of the high-tech companies here in UK. And first time I met him, I knew what he looked like beforehand. I knew his name. I knew his wife's name. And I also knew that he owned a cottage very near to where I live in Wales, although his office is in London. Mm-hmm. And so first thing I did is said, "Hello, David. I'm Stuart Morgan. Have you been down to your cottage in Wales recently?" And he was so shocked that the guy would know that he owned a cottage in Wales. He said, we usually go there in the summer. And I said, "Oh, next time you come down, let me know and I'll take you out for a drink." And that's how we got to know each other. And that was the very first meeting that I had with him.
And certainly those are the key words that will help him remember you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would counsel against stalking people. That's not acceptable. But do get to know something about them.
No, I agree, because I speak on occasions here about networking in Brazil, and more recently what I have been talking about is what I call speed networking.
Yeah.
And speed network comes exactly to what you just said. Not stalk a person, but find information about a person that's relevant and use it as you just mentioned. And what you just said during this meeting did not pass 10 seconds.
Sure, absolutely.
And you engaged, and he remembers you probably, and it gives you another step to maintain that. And nothing against, but you could also invite him to your Facebook page, and I'm sure he would appreciate that.
And he's actually on my Facebook page, and he's been a LinkedIn #1 contact ever since.
And we're talking about 15-second engagement.
Absolutely. Make it pertinent, make it personal, but don't intrude.
Good words. Pertinent, personal, don't intrude.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's PPI.
Yeah.
Pertinent, personal, don't intrude.
Yeah.
Secrets to success, right?
Absolutely.
No, secrets to engagement. And I think engaging is a success story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm part of a network in South Wales run by a friend of mine, Gavin Hilljohn, and his wife, Pippa. And they run a group on networking. And one of the rules on the group is that you don't sell.
Right.
One of the rules is just get to know each other. Right. Do not sell.
And that's one of the points I make. That networking is exactly that. You're not selling. And most people feel that they need to sell. They start their sales pitch. But taking what you just said, they need to make a personal pitch.
They need to make a personal pitch. They need to make that person feel that they're talking to an equal. Mm-hmm. Never apologize for being there. Take control of the situation, mm-hmm. and run that as a conversation.
Right, which it should be.
Which it should be. It should be a conversation between equals.
And now today that takes us, we talked about breakfast and something that's something close to your home now. And so what I've seen and been reading, the UK companies and persons now need to look out into the world. So the actual Brexit has affected the comfort zone somewhat, but I think that's good. So maybe more people will look towards Brazil.
Well, as you know, even when the UK was still fully a part of the EU, I was travelling the world. I was doing business all over the world. I don't think the EU has constrained us at all. So I don't quite understand all of the points that the Brexiteers are making. I've been doing business around the world for over 30 years now.
Right. I met you years ago doing that.
Absolutely. And I hope that we can do that again.
No, but that's the point I want to make. You personally have done that your whole life. But other persons that I know and other companies that I know haven't done that. Because they've had what I call their comfort zone. They were in business, they had their business, things were going well, they knew the people. And now they're going to have to get out of their non-comfort zone.
That's true to a certain extent, but they've always been able to do that. The leaving the EU has not really changed the ability to do that, but it's actually changed the agenda for them by making them do that.
Now, do you feel that for persons like here from Brazil, not only Europe, we're talking about the UK, but Europeans in general, will they be more receptive? Are they more receptive, or you feel it's the same?
Well, living here in the UK, I feel an increase in xenophobia, which I actually deplore. And I see some of the Brexiteers actually talking in xenophobic terms. I hate it. It's horrible. It's very uncomfortable.
And I feel that from Brazilian persons that I know here, that they're not sure how to judge what is happening. If it's a good sign, if it's a bad sign. What's your take on that?
At the moment, I'm uncomfortable with the situation, and I've not felt this way in a long time. As you know, my own wife is Russian, and she's now more and more reluctant to actually say where she was born, because she's worried about receiving unfriendly comments.
But for Brazilians, you think they would still be welcome coming to the UK looking for business or looking to engage in a business sense?
I would encourage them to do that, because the more exposure that we have to people from other countries, then the more used to dealing with people from Brazil, from anywhere in South America, from Africa, then people here will get used to that. At the moment, I think, again, coming back to where we started, Brexit has created so much uncertainty that the man on the street really doesn't know what the future holds, and they're frightened.
Not a good sign.
Not a good sign, but I think it'll only be transitory, and I think inside the country we're feeling that more than demonstrating it to people outside.
Well, you're where you live, and we're back to the Gower Peninsula. Is Gower Peninsula, is your hometown isolated, or is it involved? What's the feeling in the pub?
The feeling in the pub is, let's have another pint. We've opened several microbreweries over the last few years, and the beer is very, very good. We're getting a lot of tourists into Gower, and that's one of the reasons, coming back to that Facebook group that my wife and myself created, we created that to attract people. When my wife and myself walked round the Gower, we met people from Germany, France, Russia, Latvia, all over. And one of the great things was that we used to stop and talk to them, welcome them, explain the good places to go, and how to get quality time out of a short visit to the country.
And that's back to our PPI, right? Don't intrude, but make it personal.
Absolutely. And I remember sitting down with some Dutch people to have a sandwich, and we were pointing out places of interest that we could see across the beach and talking to them about the rich history here. And we kept in touch with them. They've been back twice subsequently.
Very good.
So they like the place.
So that's a personal engagement. That's the intimate engagement that you're mentioning.
Yeah, and
that doesn't have to be business. That's life.
That's life. And we've developed a quality relationship, but somebody's got additional business out of it. Somebody's putting them up overnight. Somebody's feeding them.
Right.
So somebody's benefited in a business sense. The tour operators certainly benefited.
Well, you saw that when you came to Brazil, how intense tourism here. And we've mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, how you love to take photos, and you're absolutely fantastic at that. And what you do with the Gower Peninsula is what you did here in São Paulo, help multiply the really unseen aspects of a country or a place.
Yeah, we walk around quite often with our eyes closed. We don't see what's there. We don't see what's obvious to the tourist. We become oblivious to what's happening around us. And I used to say to my own children and my stepson, stop looking at the footpath. Get your eyes up.
Right.
Look at what's in front of you. Right. Look at what's around you. Stop every 5 or 10 minutes and turn around and look where you've come from.
Right. Well, like you said with your board meeting with the board member, go out to a pub and just sit and chat.
Absolutely. Choose a nice pub, of course. Find one that's interesting. The pub we went to is about 300 years old, got wooden beams and a traditional bar. And the locals go there. Business people stop there because it's a nice atmosphere, and the food's fantastic, and the beer's even better.
And it's still in business after 300 years.
And it'll still be there in another 300 years.
And we'll go and see, I hope.
Yeah. Well, we got pubs. We got one pub near us called the Red Lion in a village called Penderyn, which is where the Welsh whiskey distillery is. And they've recently expanded the pub by going into an old storeroom to turn it into a restaurant. And in the process of excavating the floor in order to make a nice restaurant, they've discovered artifacts from the 6th century. And those artifacts were left by the builders who built the village church in the 6th century. And they obviously stayed in the pub, 1,400 years ago.
Well, and they did that to reduce the stress during the building, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, Stuart, I want to thank you again. We're coming to the end of our time, but the points you made are well taken. I think part of that is to de-energize maybe at this point in the beginning of 2020. Quality time, mindfulness, be upbeat, right?
Yeah, that word mindfulness is very, very important. I'm actually talking at a conference on the 3rd of April in Cardiff, where we're going to talk about mindfulness and the work-life balance.
Well, I think the next time on we'll talk about that in depth. How's that sound?
That sounds very good, Tom.
Well, thanks again, Stuart, for being with us, and always an enjoyable Monday to talk to you.
Thanks very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I hope that your listeners benefit from just a little of what we've been talking about.
I'm sure they will, because this is also an enjoyment. This is also quality time. And I want to also thank our listeners for the time and your time with our listeners. And you can all find more about Stuart Morgan on his site, which is www.pdc.wales. That's pdc.wales, W-A-L-E-S. And it's Stuart Morgan, STUARTMORGAN. So thanks for being with us today. And thank our audience and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, focusmi.com. I'd also like to invite you to visit our website, talktobrazil.com, and find our previous shows of Talk to Brazil. So remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.